Hello, everyone. Welcome to Scotty on the Horn. This is a podcast where I invite experts from a variety of fields and discuss topics that interest me. Today's guest was Dr. Sean Brayton. He is an associate professor within the Faculty of Kinesiology and Physical Education at the University of Lethbridge. Sean's expertise involve cultural studies, race and ethnicity, popular culture, film and television, physical activity, and critical multiculturalism. A little bit about Sean. He completed his Bachelor's of Arts at the University of Lethbridge. He then moved on to do his Master's of Arts at the University of Alberta. Finally, he finished his PhD at the University of British Columbia before moving to the University of Lethbridge to become a faculty member. Sean happens to be one of my favorite people to chat with in the hallway at work. He's an incredibly interesting man, has a knowledge base that is just so deep on a variety of topics. I hope you enjoy yourself with this one. We talk about movies, we talk about shows, sports, social constructions of the body, race, politics, and power. So you're in for a treat today. I hope you enjoy. So I like to start by having people talk a little bit about their sport history. So
okay.
Bring me back to little Sean. He's
That's a long
he's
time
getting
ago.
involved in sport. What did you play?
Well, once upon a time, I was into soccer as a tyke.
Yeah.
Baseball. Loved baseball. My
Baseball,
brother veered towards lacrosse
when
lacrosse started becoming more popular, but I stayed in baseball until I was probably 13 or 14 years old. And it's been mostly hockey.
Yeah.
Hockey until I was 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was it.
Nice. Where'd you end up? Where'd you play?
I played in Calgary for midget, Bandsman midget.
Yeah.
So I played for they called it the Buffs, Calgary Buffaloes.
Yeah.
That would have been AAA midget. And then my junior career was spent in Victoria for a team called the Salsa.
Okay.
It was the BCJHL at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a team they were an expansion team. We played in the old Memorial Arena where the Cougars used to play. The Cougars then went to Prince George, but I think they're still there. I think Chara played for Prince George Cougars. Anyways, Victoria Salsa was the team, expansion team. And the logo was the mascot was a jalapeno pepper, an angry jalapeno pepper with a stick. And then I played for the Kindersley Clippers in the Saskatchewan Junior League.
Okay, nice.
And that was basically the extent of my career.
Yeah. Did you still play at all? Or?
No, not at all. I watched,
and
by the time I quit, it became readily apparent to me that this was a business. Yeah. After a few trades, and you become aware that you're a commodity and you're treated like a commodity. So I'm not saying I was, a fully cognizant Marxist at the age of 20, talking about commodified labor, but you get the sense that it's no longer a game and it's a business, right?
Yeah.
And I think different athletes come to those realizations at different stages, but for me, it was in and around 20. I just lost interest and almost had a bit of vitriol towards the sport because of my disillusionment, I think. So I didn't really, I've never played beer league or men's league or anything. I coached for a while. Yeah. In terms of like goalie coaching at private clinics and did a bunch of hockey schools for a variety of NHL players. So that was the extent of I ended at 20, but I kept coaching and doing hockey schools until I was probably 27 maybe. Yeah. And now I just watch. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. When I left, I hated the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I quit in playoffs in the last year. My last year we were in playoffs.
Really?
Yeah. And I hated my coach, and I just walked away from it.
It's amazing
in the middle
more
of a
people,
series.
It's actually amazing that more people didn't quit, and I think that's owed in part to the indoctrination of young folks into the game of hockey. Right? Yeah. It really is an institution, but it's one that is. And there are great coaches, and even when we played, there were some outstanding coaches. But the kind of Iron Mike Keenan, that kind of hard ass, yell at you. Verbally and physically abusive at times. That was a de rigueur of the day, right?
Yeah.
That's you didn't speak out against that. Yeah. Because you weren't really aware that you had any rights as a human being, right? You just internalized it and went with it. Yeah. So of course, I mean, this isn't to say there wasn't resistance to the coach behind the coach's back. We were always talking shit about the coach. Yeah. If we didn't like the particular coach, even if we did like the coach. Yeah. Yeah. But the kind of front stage idea of the coach being the dictator. Yeah. I think that's changing now, and I think Hockey Canada has made some great strides into trying to weed out those bad apples is a terrible expression because it wasn't a bad apple thing when he played. That was the orchard.
Well,
you know what I mean?
It was the Mike Babcock, right? So
for sure. Yeah.
Now he's out.
I love how people are surprised. Like, really? That was Babcock? When guys like you and I are watching them, like, yep, of course. Of course it was like that. No kidding. What's interesting, though, is doesn't he have a master's degree in psychology?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not to say that he should. Well, maybe
he
should know that. McGill guy. McGill guy.
I actually followed him. He was he was in Freddie's office. So he went McGill, and then
he was in Freddie's office?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, he coached the year that the University of Lethbridge won.
I knew that.
Fred Trin has Mike Babcock's office. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I kind of followed Babcock. I did McGill, and then I wound up at University of Lethbridge, and then.
So you're Toronto bound in a few years.
Yeah, I know.
We're going to Detroit, and
then my career. So,
yeah. Hopefully, you'll get a big contract. Though.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll coach again? He'll pop up somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, even Mike Keenan popped up in Russia, right?
Yeah. I think he'll make his way back.
He's probably still an excellent coach. I mean, he wins wherever he goes. Yeah, front office.
Yeah.
Right. What about Todd McClellan? Where is he now?
No.
I would imagine some of these guys some of them jump right back into the fray.
Yeah.
But others realize that they've been paid for the next few years and they can kind of, chill out a bit. As it were.
Like a sabbatical.
Yeah. I mean, we need that.
Yeah.
I don't know if professional coaches need that necessarily. Sometimes you feel like if you get out of the loop, you're out of the loop, and you don't necessarily. There seems to be a learning curve when you get back into it. Maybe I don't know.
I don't know either. So 2 years of coaching under my belt.
Oh yeah, that's right. You are a coach. Yeah. So no season for the Thunder.
No season. I think they're trying to get a season.
Are you going to be in a bubble? Is it going to be a Lethbridge bubble?
No,
in the Hub City?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm out now. I got the daughter, so newborn coaching's done.
Yeah, no more 11.
I'm probably going to make my triumphant start in the women's game 4 years from now and coach.
There you go. Once our program's
what time it is? What time is it, Mr. Wolf, for half an hour and then a little bit of skating.
Oh, that's a good game. I remember playing that.
That was a little bit of soccer too.
Yeah.
They run around. You say, "Don't touch it with your hands. Don't touch it with your hands. Don't touch it with your hands. Other way. Other way. Other way. Don't touch it with your hands." And then you play. What time is it, Mr. Wolf?
That's awesome. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's 12 o'clock.
We're in my garage. I actually have for the first time in person, but we're trying to respect some COVID rules. So if you hear some stuff in the background, that's my neighbors. I'm not treating my... I didn't make that little girl scream. Yeah. All right. So we talked a little about your sport now. So what about academia? What's your story there? How did you get involved in academia? Where'd you go?
Well, I knew that once I finished hockey, I had to, if I wanted to avoid paying rent to my parents, I had to enroll in school.
Yeah.
So I just sort of went to Mount Royal College one day with a friend and tried to enroll in a program that would follow in the footsteps of my father, who was a social worker at the time. Actually, he was teaching at the college. And then I realized that maybe I wanted to teach phys ed. So I started in Mount Royal College that was back when it was a college. Now it's a university, right?
Yeah.
So it would have been the university transfer program of probably physical education at the time. And then I got to U of L and still thought that I would teach. This seems to be this isn't a unique story, I don't think, in the sense that a lot of people start off wanting to teach phys ed and then they realize that phys ed is actually a part of kinesiology. We can tease out the epistemology of it later. But the idea here is that, okay, phys ed is phys ed. And then you get into this department and you realize it's so much more than phys ed.
Yeah.
So I had I had some really outstanding instructors, but one in particular really stood out to me and introduced me to this idea that studying phys ed didn't necessarily mean sciences or physical education. It could be sport history. It could be sports psychology in your case. It could be sports sociology. Did I say sociology? History? Yeah, the humanities and the social sciences. Yeah. So once I became aware of that, I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I'd like to continue to pursue this. His name was Dr. Brown, Doug Brown. He did some stuff. I think Baumhoff knows him, actually. He did some stuff at the University of Calgary, or he was at the University of Calgary. Anyways, he was pretty inspirational. Sometimes you just come across people that that open windows and doors to new experiences and new ways of looking at things, right? Mm-hmm. So I took an interest in sports sociology as graduate studies.
Yeah.
So I took all of my social science and humanities courses here for Kines, and then Dr. Brown left, and then a new sports sociologist came by who was here for a bit. Dr. Robidoux was his name, Mike Robidoux.
Oh, Mike Robidoux. Yeah.
So I had a conversation I didn't take any courses with him, but him and I had some conversations about graduate studies. And he encouraged me to apply and work with a guy named Dr. Gamal Abdel Shahid at the University of Alberta. He's so formal with the doctors.
Yeah.
So I did that, but I didn't work with Gamal immediately. I eventually worked with Gamal, went to U of A, and then decided that I'd like to pursue a PhD. So that I went to work with Bob Sparks at UBC.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it.
What was your master's thesis?
My master's thesis was on skateboarding and race.
Okay.
So I think it was called something along the lines of Blacklash, Revisiting the White Negro. It was based on Norman Mailer's work.
Okay.
Norman Mailer wrote a short story called The White Negro, where he was sort of poking fun at the white hipster who was inspired by this kind of stereotype of black cool, the Hepcat, right? So my master's thesis was on skateboarding and representations of whiteness and how that overlapped with different historical iterations of whiteness, particularly as it related to Jack Kerouac and the Beats, for instance. So I looked at skateboarding media and thought, okay, there seems to be this interesting fetishization of blackness or street culture as it related to the politics of whiteness. But there weren't a lot of skaters of color in these magazines at the time. This is, early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were a few, but not many. Mm-hmm. But there still seemed to be this fantasization of the street and a racialized fantasy of the street that was cultivated, that was used to articulate a certain form of resistance and rebellion within the skateboard media, magazines and video. So that was my master's thesis. I had no idea. When I was in my undergrad doing, kinesiology, I never dreamt. I thought, studying skateboarding, because I was a skater long ago. I never dreamt skateboarding would be a subject of serious intellectual inquiry outside of the biomechanics of skateboarding. I never did I think, you could do a sociological approach to skateboarding. So I did that for my master's.
I think there's some similarities with snowboarding too.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. The use of music too, right?
Yeah.
Hip hop and rap in terms of the music, the videos of snowboarding and skateboarding, and the fashions as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the paradox, the racial paradox of whiteness and blackness in skateboarding is even more egregious insofar as it's still so overwhelmingly privileged, right? I mean, it costs so much more money to snowboard than to skateboard. There's definitely some.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Montreal, so a ski and snowboard town. And if you don't know it about me, I love rap music, right? So even the intro to my podcast, gets into it a little bit, right? Nice. But love rap music. And I remember, it's got the baggy snow pants down to the knees, and the way that you dress, the music that you listen to, it was very, very much influenced by Black culture. So I think
my first major academic presentation would have been when I was a first-year PhD student. It was in Tucson, Arizona, at the North American Sports Sociology Conference, and it was called "Bringing the Hood to the Hill."
Oh yeah,
it was about the use of blackness and the imagery, the fetishization of blackness in predominantly white snowboard culture.
Yeah. Well, all of us were white, so.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So definitely. So,
do you want me to reciprocate the questions as well? Do you feel like you're not getting any?
No. I mean, you can ask. Yeah, it's a conversation. So if you want to talk, if you want to ask questions about it too, I was going to ask you: is it problematic, or is it are there pros and cons to the blending of Black culture within predominantly white activities like snowboarding? And
that's a complex question.
Yeah.
And in some ways it speaks to, so there's a guy named David Roediger. He wrote a book called Toward the Abolition of Whiteness.
Yeah.
And he spent a lot of time talking about racial politics of working class cultures. And he said, in one of his papers, he talks about the difference between crossover and crossing over. Mm-hmm. So crossover is the extent to which predominantly white suburban young men tend to gravitate towards hip hop, so-called gangsta culture, and the backwards baseball cap. You mentioned the baggy pants. So there's this sort of this sartorial politics of blackness that's always based on a bit of a stereotype, right? That would be crossover. The extent to which white kids are into what they perceive to be authentic black culture. That's crossover, right? But the real change, the real critical pedagogy comes when crossover becomes crossing over. This isn't to suggest that someone puts on blackface. Why you stretch your imagination? But all of a sudden, when you realize that the cultural practices and the products that you're consuming come from a certain place, they come from a time, they come from a certain context that it's chock-a-block with politics and discussions of discrimination and racism and police brutality. So once you actually take an interest in that, and you start actually not embracing necessarily, but asking serious questions about how these cultural products can articulate these serious politics, you have a certain transition moving from crossover to crossing over. So it's not inherently problematic, but historically speaking, it's something that Greg Tate, he wrote a book called Everything But the Burden. He writes also for the Village Voice. And he said that he wrote this book called Everything But the Burden. And in this book, he said that historically speaking, it didn't just start with, Eminem or some white kids all of a sudden interested in NWA. It actually goes back before that. You could talk about colonial politics in terms of, 1800s, 1900s, but in American culture, it really comes back to Norman Mailer's book, White Negro, and the beat culture, this fetishization of jazz and blackness as cool. And Tate says that historically speaking, white kids have wanted everything from black culture except the burden of being black, right? So the idea here is that, hey, I can actually get a great deal of social capital by dressing in a hip hop fashion. But the difference, of course, is that I can turn my ball cap around when I see the cops. Whereas if you're black, you don't get to turn your skin around and become white. So there's a long historical conversation about not just cultural appropriation, but the fetishization that decontextualization of the authentic blackness from its historical and cultural moorings, if that makes any sense. So it's not inherently problematic if you're able to draw some connections to the struggle and the different, they're kind of like white supremacist, capitalist overtones of the commodification of hip-hop culture, the extent to which blackness has been at the heart of modernity in North America, not just in terms of the construction of an economic system in and through slavery, but through cultural production as well, right? I think Chuck D wrote a book, and he's probably written several books, but Chuck D talks about the extent to which black folks have been prioritized in American culture as nothing but athletes and entertainers. That's it. You can't be seen as scientists and so on and so forth. So it is interesting to think of how black labor is actually, and this is a nice foray into sport, black labor is at the heart of what is conceived of as the authentic American experience in and through culture. And some people talk about the extent to which black muscle, William Roden wrote a book, you probably know it. William Roden wrote a book called The $40 Million Slaves. He says that at the heart of the American sporting empire is black muscle. He's focusing predominantly on basketball and football. But he borrows from this idea of the plantation metaphor, the extent to which everybody doing the work, it's predominantly black muscle, but the people owning those bodies, and we get a really glaring example of this in the NFL, predominantly white guys, right? So the extent to which this mimics a plantation arrangement is still quite trenchant in contemporary culture. If that makes any sense.
So I'm going to go back to my own experience and sort of trying to draw upon what you're saying. So I think when I would listen back as a young teenage Scot, listen to rap music, I connected to certain things. So I grew up in a small town. Obviously, I'm not in a ghetto. I'm not in some of the same scenarios, but there were certain messages that gravitated to me. So one was that the only way to get out was through either sport or entertainment. There wasn't much upward mobility. I mean, for us, the choice was be a farmer or that, that was it, right? And if you weren't interested in that, like education wasn't well known in my town, right? So even
how many people live in your town?
300 people. Arundel, Quebec.
Right.
Like I think the town newspaper put out a story when I got accepted to do a PhD.
Really?
Right. So it's not something that many people grow up in Arundel, Quebec, and then go and pursue academia. So there was that, you have to make it out either through some kind of entertainment perspective. And then the other two was, and again, I'm the whitest looking guy out there, but I grew up as an English speaking guy in a super, super French neighborhood. So we actually faced a ton of discrimination.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. So a ton of it, like, you'd be in a locker room and the coaches would be talking about how, like, if someone did something stupid or bad or whatever, they say he plays like an Englishman. Right.
Interesting.
And like right in your face when you're sitting there. Right. Yeah. And then like, there'd be, English slurs, like in French, they called it tête carré and whatever, like square head for some reason. I guess English have square heads. I don't know where that comes from. But like actually faced a large degree of discrimination growing up. So there's certain components that you could draw to in that music that actually applied to
That's not an arbitrary comparison you're making, because historically speaking, as you would know, growing up in Quebec, the Quebecois often, in a lot of literary circles, particularly around the 1970s, drew upon this idea of the white Negro. They didn't use Negro, of course. They drew upon that analogy of being, we are the Negroes of Canada, right? The extent to which an Anglo-centric culture was seen historically as oppressing Quebecers, right? So this idea of both a real and imagined form of oppression, it's there, but the extent to which blackness serves as this ready-made metaphor for it as well. It's for a similar reason you find a lot of popularity of hip hop and rap in indigenous communities as well, right? Like Hobima's War Party. And they're using rap as a vernacular to voice criticisms of a white supremacist society, but they're doing it in ways that borrows from this perception of blackness, but also contributes to a different articulation of resistance. So there's kind of a, Benedict Anderson would say there's an imagined community between your experiences, for instance, and the hip hop community.
So that's pretty interesting.
So
I think one of the things I noticed actually that you've recently written an article on concussion.
Okay.
Right? And it ties a little bit into that power dynamics of the owners and the athletes. Can you talk a little bit about that paper?
Sure. So with our colleague, Dr. Halstein, and do you know Mike Ramsey and Nick Riccards? You may have met Nick.
I don't think so.
So Nick was a grad student of Michelle and I, and Mike was an undergrad student, and we wrote a paper. We've done a few pieces on the concussion stuff. It's the interesting thing about concussion, it's a hot topic right now, right? And it has been for a few years. And you would know this from writing papers. You finish one paper and then you realize once you've built a lit review and done the analysis, you realize that they kind of snowball into different papers. So when you say the concussion paper, I'm thinking, which one is that? Not to say that I'm Johnny producer and I have so many. Let me look at my CV. Which one are you talking about? No, that's not it at all. But I mean, the concussion piece that we worked on snowballed into these other pieces that broadly relate. I mean, there's that common thread of labor politics that runs throughout. So the concussion piece we did involved a discourse analysis, a textual analysis rather, of the ways in which mainstream media represented not just concussions, but also the suicides, the recent suicides of former players that were posthumously diagnosed with CTE. And how these timing, they say, is everything, right? So the interesting thing about the concussion paper, the first one, is that when the concussion, they call it a crisis, but crisis would suggest it's an aberration. And you and I both know that concussions are actually intrinsic to hockey and
they're
football.
built into the game.
They're built into the game. So there is no crisis. An epidemic, sure. A crisis, no. This is how I can't imagine it changing. Anyways, so as the so-called crisis emerges, and it happens at the same time as many of these suicides of Junior Seau, some of the NHL players. So you've got the suicides that are overlapping with the rise of the concussion crisis, and at the same time it's overlapping with some lockouts in the NHL and the NFL, right? So you've got labor politics, you've got suicides, and you've got concussions. And we thought, okay, this is interesting. There's a connection here. We perceive there to be a connection between these three phenomenon. We're curious as to how the concussion is reported and how the lockouts are reported in relationship to concussions in mainstream media.
Yeah.
And so we looked at a variety of mainstream publications and some niche sports publications and found that Obama said, I think in 2000, maybe it was 2008, he said that, okay, someone asked him about the NFL lockout and he said, well, you're basically talking about a discussion between millionaires and billionaires. And he thought, okay, that's an interesting way of putting things.
Yeah.
And it seemed to inform, either implicitly or explicitly, many of the ways in which the popular reporters were talking about the lockout and concussions.
Yeah.
First of all, there's the idea that you knew what you were getting into. And also, there's the idea that you're a celebrity athlete. If you play in these leagues, you're automatically a millionaire, which is misleading. We know this is not the case, right?
Yeah.
Particularly in the NFL, where you have that pyramid effect, where you've got the Brady's, the Brees, predominantly, not exclusively, predominantly the white quarterbacks at the top, and then black muscle filling out the bottom of the pyramid, right?
Yeah.
And they don't make the kind of money that Brady and Brees make. So the idea of the athlete, you're a professional athlete, you must be loaded, whereas you're escalated.
Yeah.
Right? That's the kind of the knee-jerk assumption when this isn't necessarily the case.
And I think their career span is like average of a year.
3.4 years.
Yeah, there we go, right?
Yeah.
So even if you made $5 million, it's taxed at half, and then you're down to 2.5.
Absolutely.
You've made it for 3 years.
Right.
And then you're brought into that culture where spending money is part of the game.
And you're also looking after a lot of your family members and friends too, right? Yeah. The idea of the athlete with the entourage, I think it's both fact and fiction, but the interesting thing is the burden of predominantly black athletes to take care of each other because of a level of systemic racism, particularly in the US, but also in Canada, as we're learning, right? Mm-hmm. So we found that a lot of these popular press reports were automatically describing the athletes as spoiled. Yeah. They should play for the love of the game. And then the overlap with the concussion is when the athletes were seen to, when they were reported as committing suicide or accidentally overdosing, it was seen as the individual's responsibility. They must have had a psychological problem, right? Yeah. So you see this with a lot of some of the critical theories that emerge in relationship to psychology, to the development of the psych disciplines with industrial capitalism, this idea of individualizing and personalizing otherwise social problems, right? So the idea of you being an addict and leading to an overdose, an accidental overdose, and a death, that must have been the problem of the athlete. That wasn't the institution that demanded that this player go out injured or not, beat the shit out of someone, have the big hit, so on and so forth. And then once your playing career is over, in some cases it's been reported that the Players Association, the unions, the league, they're no longer seen as valuable. Right? They're no longer an asset, so it doesn't really matter because they're not playing. They're not adding value to the game anymore. So there seemed to be this overlap. There was an underreporting. Well, there wasn't an underreporting of the concussion. There was a depoliticization of the ways in which the concussion was discussed in the popular press. So we were trying to sort of explore what we perceive to be these missing links. So we see it as a labor problem. At the professional level, the extent to which you have this, what's it called, the League of Denial, it's a business issue in many cases, right? So we saw that there was a political and an economic angle to the concussion discussion that wasn't actually being made in the popular press. And it is now, right? Well, I shouldn't say it's made in overt ways through these different documentaries, but it's not always brought back to the idea of a labor politics, which ultimately, this is how we see it, right? So one of the papers we talk about the extent to which you can draw from different literatures, obviously, to help explain the same phenomenon, right? So the first paper, we looked at how popular press does the reporting of concussions, lockouts, so on and so forth. And in a subsequent paper, we tried to incorporate different literature. So we looked at organ and tissue donation literature, cultural studies of organ donation. We also looked at, there's a guy named Vicente Navarro. He's a Marxist medical historian. And he was really interesting. His work is fascinating. So he said that, okay, if you want to study the black lung, for instance, you don't just say, okay, there's this internal condition and it's obviously a problem of this person. They have the black lung. How do we treat it individually? He said, no, you have to study, a true epidemiologist would actually study the social surroundings. So Navarro said that, and he's not the first to say it, but he says it rather forcefully, the black lung is produced through relations of production in mining, in coal mining in particular, right?
Yeah.
So you actually can't separate the illness of the black lung from the wider social and political context of labor conditions of coal mining. So we're trying to say, we're not being quite as forceful, but we're trying to raise some questions that might ask, what happens if we discuss CTE as a condition that is inseparable from sport, particular sports, like combat sports, contact sports, so on and so forth. But the idea is that the condition, the ailment, the illness is caught up with the sport.
Yeah.
And more importantly, with brain donations, these bodies, or rather these segments, these fragments of the body, the brains of these athletes are being sought precisely for what these people did for a living, right?
Yeah.
So there's an economic imperative at the heart of it, but there's also, there's a politics behind it.
Yeah. Have you looked much into MMA?
It came up a few times, and boxing is quite prominent as well. The idea of being punch drunk.
Yeah. But in MMA, there's I feel like it's even worse in other sports where only a couple people make money.
Right.
Like you have Conor McGregor, you have,
and it's notoriously anti-union.
MMA, right? Yeah. And that's it. And they'll just toss people if they start talking about it.
Right.
Just end their career.
Yeah.
But they will, how little they're paid. Yeah. And you see it too in the interviews where after the fight, and then they have these little bonuses, like if you knock someone out, knock out of the night, you get a $50,000 bonus, fight of the night, which incentivizes more reckless fighting. Right. So that you're not just scoring points, you're trying to finish a fight, which puts both you and the other fighter at greater danger.
A video game of some sort.
Yeah. So then, and they'll say it too, I wish I was more exciting afterwards if they just kind of played it safe.
Right.
And then these people will win the bonus. Their stories too, it's like, oh, what are you going to do with this bonus? And I'm going to move my family now to finally we're going to be together again, and they're just paid so little, and the training is so intensive because if you're not training all day, you're getting in the ring with a killer, someone who is specialized in hurting people, right? So if you're coming there untrained, trying to make money part-time somewhere else, you're in big trouble when you get in the ring. So
absolutely,
So
the whole idea of the celebrity athlete, and you bring up Conor McGregor. Yeah. I often call him Conor McDavid. What's with the Conor mix? Seriously. It's confusing. They're not the same guy, obviously. But the idea, when you see, he shows up in his three-piece suits, you see him driving around in his Bentley or whatever kind of boutique automobile he's driving, and you think, oh yeah, an MMA fighter, automatically rich, kind of like the Johnny Manziel, right? GQ frequently reported on Johnny Manziel's frivolous spending habits, you know? And so I wouldn't say the masses, but the average Joe and Jane would get this impression that athletes are swimming in money, this life of privilege. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. That's only the top, the few. Yeah. There was a book by an old goalie back in the day. His name was Rick Hines, I think. He wrote a book called "Many Are Called, Few Are Signed." Yeah. And it wasn't really political, but he was trying to debunk this idea that the celebrity athlete it's not a myth, but it's an over extrapolation, right? Yeah. The whole idea that every UFC fighter is Conor McGregor. Yeah. No, and we know this from reality TV shows as well. Ultimate Fighter, right? Yeah. We know that many of these people come from pretty marginalized backgrounds. Yeah. And they're fighting for their lives in some cases.
And we like that story when someone comes from nothing and then succeeds and becomes the next champion and
Rocky
came
Balboa
from the streets. And so we crave that from an entertainment perspective. Absolutely. We don't want the upper middle class kid who had the best coach in the world because their parent could afford it and he beats the crap out of everyone.
It feeds into the Horatio Alder myth, right? Yeah. The myth of meritocracy. Yeah. So the problem with that, of course, is that it actually pathologizes those that can't lift themselves up, right? Yeah. So Conor McGregor did. He was a plumber and then he was unemployed and now look at him. Yeah. So what's your problem? What's your excuse, right? Yeah. It's it's one of the most fucked up myths of the American dream. Yeah. And we are talking about the American dream.
Yeah. I find, I've recently been struggling with the idea of meritocracy because, to be honest, I always thought about it. And I always thought it was, that was me. Until recently, I said, hey, why can't you just do it, right? Because, again, I said, I came in the realm of academia. I would say I would be on the outs, right? Or be that outlier, right? Who shouldn't have gone that far. So I said, if I grew up, we had no money, academia was not something that was pushed by anyone in the town or pursued or spoken about. I took out student loans. I pulled myself up. I didn't borrow. I had no money given to me from family, and then I made it, right? So if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Right? And then recently I've been sort of exposed to this idea where saying, okay, well, just because maybe Conor McGregor does it or some other kid goes and becomes an academic who from a town where people don't do that, it doesn't mean that everyone can. Right. So,
and especially in the realm of sport.
Yeah.
The myth of meritocracy in and through sport, especially as it relates to blackness. I mean, the extent to which it pathologizes anybody that can't make it in sports. I mean, if you look at the people we're talking about here, we'll put the McGregors and the McDavids together. These are superhumans, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, it doesn't really matter what their background is and LeBron James as well. These are super athletes. Yeah. They have extraordinary talents, extraordinary work ethics.
Yeah.
This is a part of their makeup, right? Yeah. So, I mean, the whole idea of LeBron made it, why can't you?
Yeah.
LeBron, it's King James. That's why I can't do it. I'm not King James. Yeah. You know what I mean? But that myth, I mean, it does important cultural work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it actually, it's the blame culture.
Yeah.
So when you look at when you look at these athletes that make it and they come from humble beginnings, right? That old story, like Rocky. Yeah. It really does pathologize and it denigrates those that can't do it. They can't. You know?
Yeah.
You know?
Do you think? I wonder though is there a positive on that because it does give the hope for the kid or and what the balance is on. I mean, it gives everyone hope, but at the end of the road, 0.001%.
It's a false hope. Isn't it? Yeah.
So is it a good thing to have that hope for 17 years to then get your dreams crushed?
Yeah, I think part of the problem is it's always already hyper individual, right?
Yeah.
It's always a focus on the self rather than the community. And it's built on hyper competitiveness too, which we know quite well being from sport backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
Which over the years and we've had this discussion before, this idea of competing for food at the trough. And the trough is getting smaller and smaller. We haven't used the trough before. The idea of funding, right?
Yeah.
Or promotions or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? This idea of competing at the expense of building community. It's not always the case, of course, but the way that these particular myths, the cultural work that they do, it really is hyper individual and it's quite problematic. But it's easy to buy into though, right? So the hope is, you can follow those dreams. It's about you achieving certain things, the glory, if you will, the riches. But it's ultimately quite an individual experience, which is kind of like, that's the North American idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
This idea of the individual. I mean, it obviously extends beyond that, but there's sport, there's reality television, this idea of competition at the heart of everything. Yeah. This is a total tangent, but when I see these children's baking shows where little kids are competing against one another over who can make the best souffle, are you fucking kidding me? Why don't they get together? Why don't they teach each other how to cook, right? Instead they learn to see each other instead of colleagues, classmates, friends. They see themselves as enemies, right? Yeah. This kid's going to make a better souffle than me? No way. Yeah. Right? I mean, in some cases, it breaks my heart, and it just makes me feel dirty, so I try not to watch that show. Like, where are the reality shows where there's a cooperative imperative? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, maybe we got to solve this problem. I mean, it does happen occasionally in things like Survivor, but ultimately there's that kind of infighting that. So I try not to watch those baking shows.
Stay away from those. Stay away from those.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Do you guys watch much reality television?
No. as you know, we're the crime family.
You are the crime family. You're Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, we actually, it turns out we're the last people in the world to watch that show.
I've seen a few episodes. I haven't watched a lot, though. I do like Kim Coates. Yeah. Kim Coates is in it, and he's a classic Canadian actor. He's really good.
Who is he?
I don't know who he is in it. I haven't seen it. Okay. He's kind of creepy looking. Yeah. Yeah, which doesn't really help.
Yeah, a lot of them are. Yeah.
Isn't Ron Perlman in it as well?
Oh, I'm not good with names.
Okay, Ron Perlman was in The Capture. Remember The Capture?
No.
Remember the soldier from Iraq? The Iraq War or Afghanistan vet in the UK who's caught on video? He's caught on video killing his lawyer. Remember that?
I don't think I've seen it.
Are you sure? I thought we talked about The Capture.
Yeah.
And it's about surveillance and what's it called? Correcting. Remember when they correct the video footage?
Oh, yeah.
Ron Perlman is the CIA agent.
Yeah. That's a great show.
It is a good show.
Yeah.
Really good show. Yeah. But Ron Perlman is the head CIA guy.
Yeah.
He's also Hellboy. Okay. And long ago, he was in a series called Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he played the Beast to Linda Hamilton's Beauty, I suppose.
Yeah. So those of you listening, Sean probably has the most in-depth knowledge of
it's just
movies
random,
and shows.
Random.
Yeah.
Meaningless.
So we always chat, and then I'm this dummy who has no idea the names of the actors.
I've got a few years on you. I've got a few years on you. You talk about these hopes and dreams growing up. My hope and dream, I mean, I had the box. I had a television, so I was raised through a television. No offense to my mother. I spent a lot of time in front of a television. I still do.
I think we only had like 2 channels.
So. There you go.
The Magic School Bus was a big one, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So how many seasons are there? I don't know what direction the conversation you want to go, but it feels organic to ask.
Yeah.
How many seasons are there of Sons of Anarchy?
I feel like there's like 9.
9? Oh my goodness. So what are you watching it on? What platform?
Netflix.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So watching on Netflix. It just came out too, and there was originally 2, and then I think they just added all the other ones like a week or 2
really?
ago. So we were pretty pumped.
Nice.
Out of shows.
Okay. There's I feel like it's a Chicano one that stars Edward James Olmos, and it's about like a Chicano motorcycle gang. I can't remember what it's called. It might be on like the Spike Network or something.
Or is it like a spinoff, or is it?
I don't know if it is officially associated with Sons of Anarchy, but it seems to be in the same cultural conversation.
Yeah. No, originally I didn't think I'd like the show, but.
So you want a motorcycle now?
No.
Or just the vest?
Yeah.
Just the leather vest?
Yeah.
Prong horns?
Yeah. There you go. That's what we need to do.
Yeah. We could probably get Freddie on it. Freddie could get us a discount somewhere.
For sure.
Yeah. He's a rep for like
everything.
Yeah.
He's probably a Harley rep.
Probably somehow.
40% off. Yeah. So as a movie buff, I'm gonna go. What's your favorite movie?
Oh,
it's a hard one.
Yeah, it is hard. It depends it depends on my mood.
Yeah.
It depends on. Okay, so I have a few.
Yeah.
Why don't I change the question a bit and say most memorable films I've seen in the past 5 years.
Okay.
Moonlight would be one of them.
Okay.
For sure. Barry Jenkins' Moonlight. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It was it won the Oscar for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Right? Barry Jenkins' film stars Mahershala Ali. Loved Moonlight. Loved the way it was filmed. Loved the content. Haven't seen Parasite yet, but want to see it.
Parasite was good.
Okay, don't tell me how it ends or anything like that. Now, if we're talking about Bong Joon-ho, I really love. Did you ever see Okja?
No.
Okay, Okja is kind of this like sci-fi. Seems like PETA might have written parts of it, but we became vegetarians shortly after watching Okja. That's a really fascinating show. I also love Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men. Did you ever see Children of Men?
No.
That's one of my favorite films in terms of, just in terms of politics, in terms of quality filming. Ken Loach did a film a few years ago called, was it I, Daniel Blake? Yeah, if you know anything about Ken Loach films, they're difficult to watch because they're powerful films. Yeah. You feel these films. Yeah. You feel them and think, holy shit. So you want to talk about like the myth of meritocracy? Yeah. The myth of meritocracy is debunked in a lot of Ken Loach films. Okay. He often has a certain political bent that would be opposed to things like Thatcherism in the UK, right? A big critic of neoliberalism. He kind of celebrates documents. Yeah. Archives, Working Class Life in the UK. So I, Daniel Blake is really good. I thought that was pretty solid. We've been watching a lot of stuff lately. I don't know if I have a favorite film these days, but we bounce around series.
Yeah.
And we've been watching some heavy ones, but also some lighter ones.
Yeah.
So I have to say, and I'm a bit embarrassed to say so.
I was going to ask you a guilty pleasure now.
Okay, Kim's Convenience.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it?
No.
You know the series I'm talking about?
No.
No? Okay, so it's CBC.
Yeah.
It's a Korean immigrant runs a
Oh, okay,
in Toronto, right? Now, when I first saw the trailers for Kim's Convenience, I thought, fuck, here we go. We're going to have another little Mosque on the Prairie.
Yeah.
This series that is all about kind of glamorizing in a banal way, if that makes any sense. Glamorizing Canadian multiculturalism and totally downplays. It kind of rewrites the prairies as a pretty benevolent, a bit naive and a bit bumpkin, but not really racist, right? Oh, fuck, here we go. We're going to be whitewashing racism in Canada. And I have to say, Kim's Convenience, it's not only is it exceptionally well written, it doesn't really do that. I actually don't think white people are the target audience.
Yeah.
I think immigrants and children of immigrants are the target audience. And at first I kind of thought, okay, for me, any responsible film or television series that has a non-white cast needs to deal with racism. I used to think that, and to a certain extent I still do. But once I realized that racism makes sporadic appearances in Kim's Convenience, I eventually learned by watching Kim's Convenience that this is not a series that glamorizes multiculturalism necessarily. And it's not a series that's designed to teach white people about the other.
Yeah.
It's a series that doesn't necessarily feel obligated to confront white supremacy because it's set in a community in which white supremacy is not the dominating life force.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, this is really refreshing. And there is there's a variety of different roles, and I think it's actually, it is a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
We call it a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
So we'll spend the evening, my partner and I, we'll spend the evening watching some heavier stuff, and then we'll need to finish off the night before bed with something light. Kim's Convenience was the lighter one, but it was it was no less enlightening. Yeah. So some of the heavier things that we've been watching, we just finished a BBC. Did I tell you about that? Years and Years?
Yeah.
Oh, a little, it's touching too many nerves with the pandemic and with Trump. And but it's good. Yeah. It's good. It ends on this interesting kind of high note. But Years and Years. We watched Years and Years. So a favorite film, my goodness. I sort of touched on a bunch. What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite film?
Favorite film? There's a couple. I still love Fight Club.
Okay. Yeah.
That one was I always loved that movie.
Yeah.
Gladiator was a good one. I like Troy. I guess I'm seeing now I'm a Brad Pitt fan also. Okay. Back in the day.
Well,
I like that. I like those ones. My guilty pleasure, the one I'm embarrassed to tell people that I love, White Chicks.
White Chicks? Okay. I recall liking White Chicks as well.
Yeah, it's so dumb, but I don't know, it makes me laugh for some reason.
So, Gladiator, was Joaquin Phoenix in Gladiator? I think he was.
He was.
Was he the Emperor or something?
Yeah. He was in it. Yeah. Russell Crowe.
Did you see Joker?
Yes.
Okay, and? Thoughts on Joker? I didn't see it.
It's weird because it's really well done and it's well acted. I don't know if I would recommend it.
Okay.
I left feeling like crap after but I think that's the point.
Okay.
So it achieves its goal. Yeah. It's just dark. It's really, really dark.
I gathered from the snippets that I saw that it was dark.
Yeah. So I left the theater and I went with a friend of Kelsey's dad's. Actually went on a little mandate to the movies. Yeah. And then to
watch the Joker.
And then we left and we're having a couple beers, laughing around, and then we watched this movie and we're just like, jeez, that was heavy. Yeah. So it's not a feel good, and there's not like comedy sprinkled in. It's not your usual superhero movie. Right. It does a little of everything.
It seems to be an origin story that deviates from the formula of the Marvel universe. Well, it's not Marvel.
Yeah.
But
so it's,
you know what I mean.
Yeah. I don't know if I would recommend, but it's well acted and well cast and well directed.
Joaquin Phoenix is amazing. Yeah. I really admire his work. Yeah. Did you ever see, I think it's called I Was Never Really Here? He plays this war vet who becomes kind of a a hitman.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really good at nonverbal communication, Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
You know, he can make his body speak louder than his words.
Yeah.
And did you ever see The Master?
No.
With Philip Seymour Hoffman?
No.
It's a Paul Thomas Anderson film. And that was one of the first moments where I was watching it thinking, Joaquin Phoenix is amazing.
Yeah.
He plays the sociopath incredibly well.
Yeah.
And then he morphs into a character like the one in Her. Did you ever see Her?
I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, Her is a good film as well. Spike Jonze film where technology. Scarlett Johansson is the voice of this.
This is a typical conversation between us. You saying, "Have you seen it?" and me going, "No."
And then I continue the conversation with myself. Yeah. Check out Her is pretty good.
Tom Hardy's another one, I think.
Oh, yes.
He doesn't need to say a word, and you know exactly how he's feeling. And
absolutely. So he's in Capone now, right? He is Capone.
Yeah.
The titular character.
I haven't seen that one.
I don't think it's out yet. Yeah. Favorite Tom Hardy film?
Favorite one. I like Bronson's really good.
Okay.
Oh, The Fighter. But I love The Fight. But historically speaking, I love movies about brothers. So, me and my brother are both really close, and Kels will joke about that, right?
Oh,
so
really?
What did we watch? We watched one movie, Hell High Water.
High Water, yeah.
And I love that movie.
Chris Pine and Ben. What's his name? Ben Foster.
Yeah. So Kelsey, we finished the movie. Kelsey's like, I don't know. And I'm like, what? That was amazing, right? And she goes, you just like it because it's about brothers, right?
It's actually an interesting political commentary as well. So it emerged shortly after, or during the Great Recession, right? Yeah. And it's about pillaging from banks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty decent film as well.
Yeah. It was funny too. Then she goes, I'm picking the next one. And she picked one. I'll give a spoiler alert here. I have to. I can't remember the name of it, but Ben Affleck's in it. He's like a CIA guy. We get like five minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
And he's hunting. There's this like bad guy.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
I
can't remember the title.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Sounds like it. And there's this other guy, right, who's his nemesis and just as skilled and whatever. Okay. And within 5 minutes, I go, that guy's his brother. And then Kels goes, shut up, right? And I'm like, I know a brother when I see one. And that's the big turning point, right? So she picks a movie that's, because I just like movies about brothers. Yeah. The big spin is it's his brother.
That's funny.
So it's really funny. Yeah.
You didn't see Locke, though, did you?
No.
Okay. No. Yeah. I know that Locke was on one of the television stations. You can't watch Locke with commercials. It has to be one fell swoop.
Yeah.
And I told you, the premise, right? He's driving. It's just him driving.
Yeah. You told me.
And he has conversations on his phone.
Yeah.
That's a moment where I thought Tom Hardy is not just Bronson. Or he's not just. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's a fantastic film. He is. He's a cerebral actor too.
Yeah. No, he's good.
Yeah.
Everything.
He's made quite the transformation too.
Oh yeah.
What was he in Was it Rock and Rolla? He was just a slight guy, right? Yeah. He can really bulk up or slim down depending on the role.
Yeah. But he's in a lot of good movies.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess we'll transition now back into let's get back into some sport activity.
Oh, okay.
So I've always been curious. You teach the course, Social Constructions of the Body.
Yeah.
What are some of the main themes in that course?
It has nothing to do with sports.
Nothing?
No, I shouldn't say it. That's actually how I start the lecture.
Yeah.
All right, jock sniffers, if you're looking for sports, you better go elsewhere. I'm just kidding. I don't actually say that. I may have said that once, actually. Yeah. So it is the main themes of social constructions of the body. It does incorporate sport insofar as we talk about discipline and surveillance of the body. It's more of a cultural studies. Yeah, sure. The extent to which, I mean, if you're thinking about professional athletes, or just a breakdown of skill set, right? Yeah. So bodies are often manipulated in a variety of ways from a very young age. If you think about learning how to kick a soccer ball, throw a pitch or whatever, right? Yeah. So there's often, I mean, it seems really naive. This is how we learn in sport, right? Yeah. But it's important to go back to those early building blocks and realize that there's nothing natural about what we're doing, even though through repetition in various institutions and through sport itself.
It becomes reflexive.
It becomes reflexive, right? Yeah. So we come to think that boys throw a certain way and girls throw a certain way, right? Yeah. But we need to realize if we go back to those early building blocks that these are all learned behaviors. Yeah. Right? And it's entirely arbitrary who gets taught what. Yeah. So the discipline and surveillance, it ties into there are some sporting aspects insofar as you look at how we are, sometimes we're forced into doing certain things with our bodies. Sometimes we're encouraged to participate in our own discipline and surveillance. When you and I are doing a pregame meal, for instance, we'll avoid certain foods. Not because there's a dietitian staring at us saying, don't eat that ice cream.
Yeah.
It's we've learned to internalize this. We call it a carceral gaze. Right?
Yeah.
There are repercussions to the decisions we make.
Yeah.
Therefore, we better make the right decisions.
Yeah.
So this idea of discipline and surveillance and the idea of monitoring your diet, your exercise. If you don't do those crunches, you're not going to be able to do this, right?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, and this ties into the individual responsibility that we were talking about earlier, we discipline ourselves and we discipline each other now, right?
Yeah.
We monitor ourselves. So, I mean, in terms of academia, there are professors that will spend extra hours in their office with the door open, giving the presentation. Some of them are very productive and active.
Yeah.
Many of them are not, right?
Yeah.
But they're performing intellectualism insofar as they're at their office. They're giving the impression as though if someone were to walk by, they're hard at work, right?
Yeah.
So it's really about controlling our behavior. As Irving Goffman, the late sociologist, would describe it as a body idiom. So we use this vernacular that we inherit to communicate certain things about our actions. Sometimes it's in sports, sometimes it's in diet, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's in the clothes and the hairstyles we wear. So the body class, it has some relationship to sport, but it's more about reading the body as a sign in a variety of social and historical contexts. Okay. So we talk, and it's kind of a sociology of the body course, but it's also a cultural studies of the body course. There is a difference. So a sociology of the body course would look at the work of Michel Foucault, Irving Goffman, maybe some Mary Douglas if you're into anthropology, and they'd look at things like the panopticon. They would look at the body idiom. A cultural studies approach would explore the bodily metaphors. So a cultural studies approach to the body would look at semiotics and the different ways in which hairstyles, for instance, would correspond to different meanings in different times and places. So one of the themes that we talk about in that course, we rely on the work of a guy by the name of Kobina Mercer. He has an article called Black Hairstyle Politics. Okay. So we spend a day talking about the ways in which afros and dreadlocks hairstyles were seen as resistant in the 1960s, and they became commercialized and commodified shortly after. So the idea here is that there's no inherent meaning to the body.
Yeah.
Sure, we have these different biological processes, but the meanings of those bodies are socially constructed.
So
the meanings of those bodies.
Neoliberalism about?
We do, when we talk about the body and commercialism and consumer culture, we do talk a little bit about neoliberalism, the idea of personal responsibility, the idea of the commodification of everything.
Yeah.
Right? But we spend a great deal of time talking about, a good portion of the course is unpacking the things that we've come to internalize reflexively, as you said.
Yeah.
That we just kind of know.
Yeah.
It just is what it is, right?
Yeah.
What's a desirable body? A desirable body is thin, predominantly lighter skin, straight hair. We are encouraged to think that this has always been the case.
Yeah.
But this is only relatively recently, through various institutions or what Althusser called ideological state apparatuses, we're encouraged to internalize this as normal and natural. So it's through repetition that things seem to become natural and normal, right? Okay, but the purpose of the course is to back up and say, wait a second, someone made a conscious decision about what image to put on that magazine.
Yeah.
It's not because white people are naturally beautiful. It's because of a variety of white supremacist logic, for example. Right?
So the idea of seeing FedEx truck. So the idea of seeing the same looking person over and over and over again during a certain period of time would be what would construct maybe what we think is athletic or what we think.
Absolutely. Or even just taking the signifier. Okay. If we get into semiotics and we get into structural linguistics, we use this idea of the signifier, right? Or the sign, which is made up of two components. I don't want to get too didactic here. But the idea here is that there's the signifier that does that thing that does the representing, and then the signified, the meaning.
Yeah.
Now, we are taught through these various institutions that relationship is permanent, it's fixed across time and space.
Yeah.
But in social constructions of the body, we learn that it's entirely arbitrary. There's no necessary relationship between the signifier athlete and the meaning, Connor McDavid, right?
Yeah.
So we have different examples. An athlete, we use athlete as a signifier. We say, okay, so in a historical period, when I said, in a particular historical period, let's say in the 1800s, I said athlete, maybe you have a picture of a guy with a roly-poly mustache on a penny fart.
Yeah.
White guy, probably European, most likely a property owner, right? Yeah. That was the signifier, or rather that was the meaning behind the signifier athlete.
Yeah.
But in a different historical period, in a more contemporary sense, I'll show a picture of Kathy Freeman, the Aboriginal runner in Australia. This is an athlete too.
Yeah.
In another historical context, I'll show a picture of Mark Zupan, who was a quad rugby player, right?
Yeah.
This is an athlete as well. But if you look at different historical periods, in the time of, let's say, the mustache penny farthing guy, when you said athlete, the Aboriginal woman was not considered an athlete, nor was Mark Zupan.
Yeah.
So this signifier of athlete, meaning one thing, it changes across time and space. Yeah. And this is the heart of political struggle, right?
Yeah.
So when you say citizen, or when you say woman, or any kind of signifier, really, you need to realize that that relationship between signifier and signified is historically contingent and constructed, and we can raise questions about who gets included and who gets excluded from that category of athlete, for instance, right? Yeah. So not too long ago, disabled folks were not considered athletes, right? Yeah. The disabled subject was not considered productive, mobile, autonomous, so on and so forth. But it's through raising questions about the meanings and the inclusivity and exclusivity of that category. And you see how this all ties into the body too.
Yeah.
So the meanings of bodies, in other words, change across time and space, and we need to raise questions about who decides and what are the consequences, what are the results of making those decisions about inclusion and exclusion.
Okay, so the focus really is on, I guess, if you're trying to deconstruct it, the first lesson that you're trying to show is that what we think may be true is something that we just experience over and over and over again. That would be the first one. And the second would be that the questions that need to be asked are who is in control of what repetition is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a lot of discussion about discourse and ideology and power relations, right?
Yeah.
So the things that we receive in the dominant curriculum, for instance, we can raise questions about it. And it's not normal. It's not natural. This category, I can't remember who said it. Nature is the alibi of power.
Yeah.
So when someone says, oh, it's natural.
That
girls throw that way. Yeah. What that appeal to nature is concealing is the extent to which sexism and discrimination underwrites a whole range of bodily practices.
And I guess exposure to opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So, I mean, the social construction of the body, it goes in a variety of directions.
So I found
it gets weird.
I guess on this topic, I found it interesting in academia. When I first came in, I was like a heavily muscled guy. Yeah. And everyone thought I was an idiot.
Interesting.
And once I lost weight and became more athletic and less
like everybody
in academia. Okay. It's just like I was the joke of each class, like the meathead, right? Yeah. And then once I lost weight and became athletic looking instead of bulky and built, then suddenly I was smarter. Yeah. Right. So I
very Cartesian, right?
Yeah, I fit the trend now.
Yeah. Yeah, we do talk a little bit about Cartesian dualism. Yeah, I mean, and there's a famous quote from Margaret Atwood. She says, I have nothing against the head, nothing against the body. I have everything against the neck, which gives the idea that somehow they're separate. Yeah. So, but this is what you're talking about, right?
Can you explain a little bit more Cartesian dualism?
Mind over body, right?
Okay.
I mean, Cartesian dualism is quite trenchant in the university. Yeah. As kinesiologists, I'm not playing a victim card here, but kinesiologists are stigmatized, aren't they? Yeah. So, and I often, I kind of like the underdog label. Yeah. I quite embrace it. Yeah. So, and I've experienced it as a faculty member, but also as a graduate student. When my colleagues would ask if I completely understood the assigned reading in one of my graduate classes because they were aware that I was in kinesiology or human kinetics, it was at the time. Yeah. It's very patronizing. Yeah. But I kind of play with it, ironically, because frankly, I don't really give a shit. Yeah. But I think it's also what connects us with our students. The stigma of the kine student, right? Yeah. So when we aren't wearing sweatpants, we are blowing minds. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So when I walk into a class and I'm wearing a suit and not, a pair of fleece pants that say horns across the ass. Yeah. Sometimes people are like, wait a second, this is kines? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no reason why kine students and people that are into sports can't be cerebral.
Yeah.
Academic. Right?
Yeah.
But we still wear it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you experience it when you go to different psychology departments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you do sports psychology? You probably do sports psych light.
Yeah.
Or if I'm a sports sociologist, I go into sociology department. Oh, really? Okay. So you do sociology light then.
Yeah.
It's like, no, not really.
Yeah.
It is the stigma. And that is Cartesian dualism.
Yeah.
Really, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're just into muscles.
Mm-hmm. I find, though, it's interesting with that connection because I find that being in shape gives credibility to your students to want to listen to you.
Okay.
So
like a trainer, like a nobody, or like a skinny chef. Is it the skinny chef syndrome? Never eat food from a skinny chef.
Yeah. But I find that if my thought was if I'm in sports psych, I need to look like someone who's in sports psych, right?
Okay.
So when they look at me and they go, okay, well, he's not just an outsider studying sport.
Right.
He can play sport.
Right. You're not just an egghead. As
yeah.
Right.
And I find that in doing sports psych research, if you don't, especially in hockey, if you don't look the part and sound the part, they just shut you out. You're done. Don't do
you're
we're not
kind
going to do
of
a study.
It seems like you're in a bit of a liminal area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? In the sense that you need this is body idiom. This is Goffman, right? This is social construction of the body.
Yeah.
You need to look a certain way to gain capital.
Yeah.
In sports, right?
Yeah.
So if you come in, looking like Noam Chomsky, and you're going to tell a bunch of athletes how to do things, they're going to be like, "Have you ever shot a puck?"
Yeah.
You probably
exactly.
hasn't.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you were to look like Noam Chomsky and you went to an academic conference, people wouldn't bat an eye.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you need to.
Yeah.
You're straddling two different worlds here.
Thread that needle.
Yeah.
And that's where I found as the bulky guy, I couldn't do it.
Interesting.
Whereas the athletic, slim guy, I could go into sport and back into academia.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now you dress up when you lecture as well.
Yes, I do. Yeah. So I wear a dress shirt, I wear dress pants. And I didn't start doing it, actually. When my first semesters, I wore Lululemon, like everything. And the students used to tease me about it.
Yeah.
But I actually noticed two things. One was that students would just swear in front of me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But not like calling me names or anything. But when they tell me a story, like, I'd ask them, how the weekend's going. And like, fuck, I went to I'm like, man, when I was in school, there's no way I was swearing in front of a prof, right? Yeah. So, and I mean, I'm pretty open, laid back guy, so I invite students to be themselves. And
your appearance isn't far removed from your students.
Yes.
You don't have a gray beard.
Yeah, I can't even grow a beard. But then I put on the dress clothes, and then it, I think, created a little bit of degree of separation.
Absolutely.
And they're still open, but a few less F-bombs.
Yep.
And so I've now gone into dress, more professional.
Yeah.
So I think part of that was the age thing. I had to age myself a little with my clothing.
Right.
Which I guess ties into the representation of the body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So I mean, if I were to, if I walked into class with a Nickelback t-shirt, the students might think of me differently than when I normally walk in with a tweed suit on. Right?
Yeah. That's it. You know what?
Maybe just point to the door if I walk in with a Nickelback shirt.
That's another confessional. Some Nickelback songs get me going.
There was a meme. This was the federal election 2 cycles ago, and there was a picture of Chad Kruger with Stephen Harper, and the meme said, "Remember, a vote for Harper is a vote for Nickelback." It's pretty funny, but I completely understand about the style and the dress, right? Yeah. So I started dressing in a suit and tie.
Yeah.
Early in my career, it was to provide a more a visual separation between myself and the students, and it raises everyone's game, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, I'm a fan of comfortability in the class, but I think through dress you can elevate the intellectual conversations in some ways. Obviously, not on its own in and of itself. Yeah. And I don't mean dressing like a banker, you know what I mean? Like a lot of our rural students, when they see a banker, they're like, "You're here to take my dad's land," right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you can't walk in there like a dean and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna have a great conversation with my students." Yeah. So I strategically dress in ways that would suggest that I'm not on Bay Street.
Yeah.
or on Wall Street.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I dress a little poorly, if you will.
Yeah.
Bring out the tweed. So in some cases, I'm trying to play the academic role.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was a guy, I think it was the University of Calgary, named Bob Stebbins, and he studied aspiring doctors, med students. And what he found was one of the most important things that med students learn in med school is not about the body. It's not about diagnostics. It's about acting like a doctor.
Yeah.
So it's about bedside manner in some ways, but it's also about presenting yourself as the person that knows, right?
Yeah.
So in some cases, we kind of, whether we're always conscious of it or not, we become the professor that we learn from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we act like the way we're supposed to act. Yeah. Even though we always said, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to be like my parents. Right?
Yeah.
And then you become your parents. You're like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, I know.
Right? I'm never going to be that prof who wears the corduroy blazer with yellow patches. Yeah. Here I am.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
I'm just going to fall into these roles.
For sure. But I find when you start with imposter syndrome and then you pick up the cues and learn essentially how to behave. What would you think though? You talk about how you teach that the body is socially constructed.
Yeah.
So myself, I kind of took that, and I do it often too, is if I'm in a new scenario, I take a second and I stay quiet and I learn the social expectations and how you're supposed to behave and whatever. And then I read the room and then I can, I'm still myself, but I know how far to push it. Right. And the same thing with academia. So I learned, you probably should dress this way. You're going to want to talk this way. Drop a few less F-bombs, right? Right. So you learn how to speak. I say that like I would put on an academic mask, right? Mm-hmm. Would you recommend learning what it is and adapting to it or fighting against it, right? Because part of my lesson is I always say learn, or when I'm giving advice, sometimes I say learn the rules of the game and then play to win.
That's a question that I think you can answer that in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
I think, I think the rules, some people don't have a choice and they can't actually fit the rules.
Yeah.
Some are quite skilled at manipulating the rules.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like in post-colonial studies, there's an article by a guy by the name of Homi Bhabha. He talks about this idea of colonial mimicry, of fitting in by, and it's not a form of assimilation. It's actually quite a disruptive practice, but by mimicking the colonizer, right?
Yeah.
By speaking English, by reading Shakespeare, by eating fish and chips, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this idea of the mimic man, it's possible and it can be advantageous, but for some, the standard is always out of reach.
Yeah.
So when you think about language and the myth of it's not the standard language movement based upon the myth of a standard English.
Yeah. So
when someone says, I can't understand you, you're not speaking English, even though the English is perfectly fine, it just happens to have an accent.
Yeah.
And all English has accents, right? The idea of, fit in, act the part, it's an assimilationist impulse. And I know you're not talking specifically about multiculturalism. But I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes the ability to adapt is the product of privilege that is not equally distributed.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a product of adaptation.
Yeah.
Of the one is compelled to adapt or die.
Yeah.
Right? So you learn to fake it.
Yeah.
Or otherwise you'll never be in that club.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And I found that with academia was you come in and then I would learn to speak the academic speak, which would then grant you a seat at the table, which then could allow you to fall back to just who you were. Once you show that, hey guys, I can do this too, but now let's just be human.
Fake it until you make it.
Right?
Yeah.
But it got you into the door. But then, so if I just open with casual speak and whatever, then maybe I don't get a seat at the table.
Right.
But if I opened and showed that I can be an academic too, I understand what you're talking about, and, we have the same experiences here. Okay, now I'm part of the club, and now we could just be humans. And then you revert back to, and you both destroy this facade, and then you're just back to two people who grew up in small towns or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder, with that advice.
So at what stage do you feel comfortable enough to revert back? I would say you're not necessarily reverting back to your old self. You just have multiple selves, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about identity.
Right? Yeah. And you carry that core across it.
Yeah.
But then
it's just the boundaries aren't maintained with such fixity, right?
Yeah.
So you can drop a few F-bombs in the classroom or at a faculty meeting and get away with it because you've proven yourself, right?
Yeah.
You've passed the ranks.
Yeah. And I think just, if you're talking with, a big shot in research, it always starts really formal and academic and then degrades within, 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And then you're, okay.
Very few people are able to maintain that scholarly rigidity, right? Yeah. And if they maintain it, you're kind of like, okay, maybe this person is always like that.
Yeah. I don't want to talk to you.
We're not going to go for coffee.
Yeah, you're not that interesting.
Absolutely.
But I do find that funny that there's that everyone feels like an imposter because you don't speak the same way, but then you go and replicate it and make others feel like an imposter.
Right.
So then this is part of why I'm doing this is trying to show, hey, it's just human beings, and
I mean, the question that you're asking is actually it's multidimensional, and it really is in some cases an ontological question, an epistemological question. What counts as research, right?
Yeah.
So do I have to go out and do empirical research so that I can prove myself in your eyes?
Yeah.
Or can I just get away with doing theoretical discussions? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what counts as valid research is basically, this is how we can branch this question off, right? So it's not just about speaking a certain tongue or wearing a tie or sitting with a particular type of comportment. It's also about the type of research that is done. Oh, you do sports psychology? Oh, okay. Maybe you should publish in some psych journals and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
I'm being facetious, of course, but
I've had those conversations too.
Oh, yeah.
Some people are publishing in impact factors of 20. Yeah. Okay, well, our best journal is 3, and it has a 95% rejection rate. So you're telling me that my 3 is not good.
The impact factor is based on incestuous citation.
Yeah.
And
So I find it, a larger field just makes everyone in that field look better.
Right.
But I find it interesting too, where we could sit down and write a paper on what we're talking about right now. We publish it and it's worth something. We have this conversation, and let's say this podcast goes big and blows up, reaches 100,000 people.
Right.
It's not worth as much as a paper read by 3.
Right. Yeah.
But the same ideas are discussed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The venue matters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in some cases, the merit of one venue is entirely arbitrary.
Yeah.
It is strange.
Yeah.
No.
So if we come back into the classroom now, so one of your first lessons is talking about how it is socially constructed. What else do you cover in there in that course?
We talk about, so we start off with this sociology of the body, different approaches. We talk about how the sociological interest in the body is relatively new. It really didn't start until the 1960s with various feminist movements. The aging body, the baby boomers, the crisis in defining the body with virtual technology, so on and so forth. And then we sort of branch out into culture. We talk about pop culture. Yeah. So we spend a bit of time talking about literary representations of the body. Yeah. We'll talk about the theories of Mikhail Bakhtin, the carnivalesque, the celebration of grotesque realism, fat bodies, of feces, of piss, cum. We talk about the extent of it. When I bring this up, I always talk about a turd on the desk. Yeah. And the response of the students illustrates the point that I'm trying to make. Yeah. So it's always imaginary, this situation. If you walk into the classroom and there's a turd on the desk, what are you going to do? Yeah. You're not going to that fucking classroom. You're leaving. But I tell them, the turd is not going to kill you. Why did you just leave? Yeah. And we talk about boundaries, inside, outside, sacred, profane. Yeah. So in talking about things like grotesque realism, we try to unpack the ways in which things that are otherwise natural to our bodies, when they become, as Mary Douglas says, matter out of place, they cause social problems. They cause psychological problems, right? Yeah. The sacred and profane, it doesn't matter what we consider sacred and what we consider profane. They just need to be separated, right? Yeah. So once you have the breakdown of those boundaries, you have the breakdown of the social order. Okay. So when we do spend a bit of time talking about something that Julia Versteva calls the abject, these things that haunt the healthy development of identity. Yeah. And the healthy subject is based upon this clear separation between self and other, right? Yeah. But things like poop and pee are always a bit troublesome because we're they are a part of us, but they're not a part of us, right?
And
we can never get rid of them.
Yeah.
We poop every day, but we do it again and again and again, right?
So it's interesting you mentioned that, because I see that a lot in aging research, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's actually it's a strange ism, right? So you have sexism, you have racism, and you have ageism, right? But it's very unique in the sense that it's the only ism where you are an in-group and then become an out-group, right? So you grow up young, which is put in the spotlight. It's very positive, right? We look at young bodies as very beneficial, as something that's valuable, and old bodies are not, right? So you spend the majority of your life in this young body, and then eventually you become an out-group member.
Right.
You become old.
Yeah.
Right. And what they
I don't know if I would call it an out-group necessarily. I would say that the construction of that body changes.
Yes.
So you're not an out-group in terms of the advertising community.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You become a different target.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, Cialis is your thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you turn on the television and you watch Gossip Girl, you're like, where are the old people? Wait to the commercial when you go to TLC or whatever. You're everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you may be an out-group in terms of certain representations, but you're also constructed as a problem in other narratives.
Right? But the funny thing that you tend to see is that when you're doing these implicit bias tests, right?
Yeah.
Typically, you'll see races have a preference for their own race, right? But what happens with age is there's always a preference for young.
Okay.
So because they've been young for their whole life, even when they're old, they show the preference for young.
Right.
But they're no longer young anymore.
Right.
So there's this dissonance between what they think is positive and important, but what they are now. Right. And they used to be there.
Yeah.
So I study masters athletes who are highly physically active.
Yeah.
I mean, they are a very privileged population. They tend to have a lot of money, so they're deemed successful agers. What we tend to see is a black sheep effect, right? So they're very proud to be masters athletes because it defies the stigmas of aging and lets them stay within this in-group of being young, fit, healthy bodied. And what they'll do is they have this negative perception of old faces and old bodies, right? Sure. I'm aging, but I'm a masters athlete. I'm not one of them. So they push other views in other groups of older individuals.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a nice overlap between what you're discussing and the themes of social constructions of the body. The stigmatization of wrinkles, scars, flab, right?
Yeah, and when they see these bodies that aren't young-looking older bodies, they say, that's not me. Right. And they're very protective of their master's athlete identity because it allows them to sort of stay within that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Just ties.
Huh. Yeah, the aging body is quite fascinating. In a variety of ways. A question that I often ask my students is, when was the last time you saw old people fuck? On screen, not in person. And I don't say fuck. Maybe I do. I don't know. And I'm not talking, my qualifier is, I'm not talking about some kinky niche porn. I'm talking about in popular culture, when was the last time you saw two aging bodies make love? And they can't come up with anything, but some of them come up with some corny, like Judd Apatow film or something. And it's like, right, that's my point. When you see old people fuck, it's supposed to be a site of comedy. Right?
They don't do the useless 3-minute sex scene in the movie between two 80-year-olds.
Exactly. Because old bodies are supposed to be non-productive and asexual, right? There's actually a similar discussion between aging bodies and disabled bodies as well, right? This idea that you don't have the same desires.
So
certainly not desirable.
We draw a lot of parallels with the disabled body literature as well to try and understand the concepts with adult sport. Right? Because they're going through this concept now where they're super competitive, but they're not allowed to be because they're old. Right? So they're older, so they'll be reticent in speaking about their competitive orientation. Right? So you'll ask them and they'll say, hey, do you care about winning? No, it's all about fun, friendship, and all these things they're told they're supposed to do sport for, right? And social activities, right? yet you watch them and they're at their banquet and they're wearing their medals. Right? So if you don't care about competition, why are you wearing your medal as an 80-year-old to a banquet?
Yeah.
Right?
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So we see a lot of parallels there on and trying to make it okay to be competitive as an older adult and trying to be okay with the masters competition. Right.
Yeah. Can I take a bathroom break?
Yeah, you can, for sure.
I had too much water.
Yeah. All right, so come back into it. So we were just talking about aging. What got us into that? We're talking about social construction of the body, the course. Oh, the feces.
Yeah, the poop.
Yeah.
So the course does talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. There's a range of subjects. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna.
Yeah, I mean, we try to approach, or I try to introduce the students to a range of approaches or theories and philosophies surrounding the body. And one of I find it enjoyable because there's a nice shock value to the grotesque. Yeah. And it's everywhere, and yet it's never, students don't often get a chance to intellectualize it or think critically about why it is that we find bodily fluids so gross when there's nothing more natural, really. Mm. So it's important to think about the different representations or non-representations of these things, like scars, wrinkles, the signs of decay of the aging body are seen as taboo. Yeah. So this would get to this outgroup type thing that you're talking about, right? Yeah. But in other ways, it's pathologized. We have to remove it. We have to get it out of sight. Yeah. And the only way we see the only spaces in which these bodies are allowed to be is when they're problematized, right? Yeah. In pharmaceutical advertisements. Yeah. That is the dominant realm of representing aging and old bodies. Yeah. Which is really problematic.
Yeah, there's some studies that are out there, and they looked at birthday cards.
Okay.
And I think it was something like 90% of all birthday cards for people above a certain age are negative representation of age, right? Huh. So they talk about, like losing cognition. Yeah. And they're usually satirical, right? And then they do certain studies on cartoons and depictions of older people. Okay. And it's almost always negative too, right? Mm. So in my class, I always show the classic Simpsons article. There's, who was the grandpa? I can't remember his name, but Grandpa Simpson,
Abe.
right? Abe. Yeah. So it's the classic newspaper article, and this one says, "Old man yells at cloud," right? And then there's Dr. Farnsworth, Futurama. Right. So you always have that senile old man and it's usually done in a way that is supposed to be funny. Right. Right? Yeah. So when we typically look at ageism versus sexism and racism, it's usually on the lighter end. It's usually poking fun. It's not as overt. Yeah. And it's more widely accepted. Sure. Right? Yeah. Absolutely. Sometimes they intersect, right? Yeah. I mean, in terms of Hollywood, ageism and sexism. Yeah. Right? The idea of, and it ties into your discussion of the masters athletes, to a certain extent. The idea of the old female actor. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And how a certain percentage of roles only go to the young actors. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas the old man can get by. Yeah. All right. Yeah. For a while, anyways. Yeah. So, any other topics that you cover that you think are worth discussing here?
How are you finding the pandemic, man? Yeah. Like isolation. I mean, there's a whole. I think you could have a whole podcast just talking about how not just our lives have changed, but how, if we've been privileged enough to reflect upon our own experiences at work, and in terms of research in quarantine, what does our work mean now? Yeah. Or 6 months ago? What will it mean in 6 months? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's I found a couple things.
Have you been productive? And what does productivity mean when people don't have jobs, when people are dying? Yeah. I don't mean to be gross. But.
No, I kind of had a reflection on the importance of my research now. Right. Where I'm thinking, all right, maybe funding dollars need to go elsewhere for a couple of years, right? Yeah. So that was kind of a bit of an eye opener. I've also seen And I think there'll be some value there, but the classic researcher adapting to the time and picking the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of the productive and highly productive now have shifted and are studying the lived experience of 14-year-olds with COVID and volleyball. Right. So if I wanted to publish,
so it's a niche market now, COVID.
Well, yeah. So if I wanted to publish right now, it'd be a very good thing. I would study university athletes' experience in the COVID lockdown. With how did that impact their identity, beliefs, and thoughts about sport?
Yeah, I think low hanging fruit is probably a good description for that.
And I mean, I don't want to be insulting people doing that research. I'm sure there's some good stuff, but it's one that I'm just not going to play that one right now. I'm just sit this one out. Some people will find some really important things. My own topic doesn't lend itself too well for this.
It would seem gimmicky if you squeezed it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Leadership in the pandemic. I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna sit out for this one.
I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's okay.
And in the world of productivity, I've been fortunate that I'm a co-editor right now of a book.
Okay.
So during this year, I'm going to have 6 products or so. I have a bunch of, so I'm just writing book chapters.
Right.
So this would be the year, I'd say, for reviews and systematic reviews and book chapters to get those out where you don't have access to data.
Right.
Or you can't be collecting data.
Yeah.
So I've been doing
it definitely
that.
affects it for
sure. I would say I've been productive for sure in terms, just because I was fortunate enough that this was the year I was writing books and book chapters, right? Where if I had been a data collection year, I'd have been screwed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I find life-wise it was very different. Mm-hmm. I talked about it in my last podcast that's coming out. We were talking about mental health, and I was at the point where I was kind of working so much and doing so much that I was staving off panic attacks. And with the birth of Katie and then the pandemic, I was forced out of my additional roles beyond teaching. And then summer came, and I kind of had a reflexive period where I looked at my life. I said, what's important here? Why am I pushing myself that far? So I've actually stepped back a little bit and started to do things such as a podcast, which I get pleasure out of, but don't necessarily count. Right? I don't think,
you don't have to, I think the word is rendering. You don't always have to render all of your life experiences into a publication. Right? There's much to be said and critiqued, I think, about the productivist mentality. Right? Not only how we define productivity, but just the idea of productivity. We don't have to be productive. Right? I mean, it's easy to say as a tenured professor, but I think we need to reevaluate that. And in some cases, I think the pandemic has encouraged that. But the COVID is only one pandemic, right? That we're talking about over the summer. I mean, the Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd, the Breonna Taylor. It's been a political pandemic, it seems, as well. It's just, I mean, early, it was the quarantine, it was Trump, it was police brutality. You know, there was so much going on that I wouldn't say I had a crisis of confidence in terms of research, but I felt like this is a time to just shut the fuck up and listen, right? Nobody needs to hear another white guy talk about race or whatever. So I found myself being really productive in the early maybe month and a half, and then I just kind of shut it down, and just read for the sake of reading, and early I was consuming way too much CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, CBC, too much. Like I was becoming a poor man's Howard Hughes, huddled up in the basement. But I just found I think it's encouraging a lot of introspection. In terms of what we think the normal was and what a return to normal might mean, and if a return to normal is even desirable.
Well, I mean, it pushed me into rethinking my class.
To
the point where I've done now a flipped classroom. Where I post my lecture online. And I'm going to see how it goes. It might be a failure. But then what I'm going to do is meet with students. So you watch the lecture, and then let's just talk like we're talking now. what's testable is online.
Yep.
This is for actual growth and for looking at, beyond, because, when I teach a lot of sports psych concepts, it's as if they're perfect. Right? Just so that people can grasp them. It's hard to teach.
So how are you meeting with them?
So I'm going to meet on Zoom.
Okay.
And I'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But it's something I'm going to carry forward. If it fails here, I might try it in person too, where I no longer lecture in class. I meet with you and we talk and debate and
so
uncover rocks.
If and when we resume to in-class format, would you just set aside, would you just do you'd still have an assigned lecture time, but you'd meet with the students for 10-minute blocks?
No, I'd have an assigned lecture time.
Yeah.
And only those who are interested are coming to my class.
Okay.
It's not mandatory.
Okay.
Nothing we talk about in the class, in that classroom, is testable.
Okay, just the material that's posted.
Just the material that's posted.
And then you would have additional personalized office hours.
And then I would start in that classroom and I would go over what people didn't understand.
Okay.
You can leave after that. And then I would get into the weeds and talk about where the field's going, what are some of the problems, what people thought and felt. And then you'd have more of a captured audience. So you'd have the 20 that care beyond their GPA who come to class, and I have more interesting conversations, and I can push people to a limit without having that extreme focus on GPA.
Yeah.
And I hear that on my
last part for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, some issues that might arise might relate to labor. How much that's going to take out of you, right? In terms of hours, but also sometimes the students don't even know that they're turned on. Okay, so I like the idea. I think it's interesting. But for me, some of the students don't really have much of an interest in the course until I talk about shit. Very few students have that. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't know if it was an optional class, they wouldn't show up in the first place.
Yeah.
So, and I think we're similar in the sense that so much of when we think we're interesting, it works. We always think we're more interesting than we are, but lecturing is so important. The in-person, the immersive experience is so critical to our pedagogy, right? I mean, I don't know how you loop the students in that don't come from the outset.
Yeah. You know so, I mean, they would just be exposed to me lecturing on the material.
Yeah.
In a Zoom, like a recorded Zoom format.
Right. Okay, so you do have some.
So yeah, I give my lecture and I film myself giving it, and they could watch that. Yeah. And in there I'm telling my jokes. I don't have any interaction with the student, which
that's what I'm missing.
Nearly as fun.
Yeah.
But then if they wanted to know more and interact with that material beyond testable portions, they'd come to the classroom, and then we talk about real things like right now. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you could ask questions in front of a smaller group. Instead of being 60 in the classroom, now you're 20. So you're a bit more comfortable.
That might be the way forward.
And then in the conversation, there's an encouragement to make mistakes because nothing's testable. Right? In that, it's just let's learn. And
I think
push me, right?
Yeah, by default, you would have smaller classes.
Yeah. And more of a captivated audience. Yeah. So it's selfish on my perspective.
Yeah. You would essentially be turning that into a seminar without the grading scheme.
Yes. So, but those who only need the class to graduate and don't like sports psych and have no, they have all the material. They've got everything presented to them. Yeah. They could get 100 in the class. Yeah. The classroom experience would be for those who just want to challenge themselves and push beyond the material.
So you're thinking of this in future semesters? Yes. Not the fall.
I'm trying it in the fall.
You're trying it in the fall. Okay.
Which might be a failure. Yeah. But even in person, I might try the flipped classroom. Okay. So we'll see how that goes.
Let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the fall will be interesting, that's for sure. Yeah. I did record my lectures. I just did narration. Yeah. I didn't do any video or images. Mm-hmm. They're big files, hey?
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah. So I posted them on Moodle. Yeah. And they're just like the PowerPoint ones. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. It's kind of like bankable hours, right? Yeah. Like the work is done, so just consider that your lecturing is basically done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'll do the synchronous component. I think is just going to be the Moodle discussion forum. I'll use that. Yeah. 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 It will be interesting. I mean, I'm going to miss it for sure.
Oh yeah. Well,
being in
that's
class.
the best part.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Even when you have a shitty lecture, it's still better than talking to your computer.
I know.
Yeah.
And then just as.
So what classes are you teaching in the fall?
Sports psychology and then aging physical activity.
Is the aging one a seminar? 4th year?
No.
No, 3rd year?
It's a 4th year, but I don't do seminar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's I'm going to do the same.
How many students?
20.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's usually good conversation.
Yeah.
And then we do a lot of student-led projects.
Yeah, I have that in my 4th year seminar.
So half of my class is the basics. So I talk about some of the material, even the idea of the aging body and movement in group versus out group.
Yeah.
I talk a little bit about the impact of older adults on the healthcare system, impact of physical activity and sport, and how sport might be a special avenue to get people more involved in physical activity, and just to be one way to fight the whole obesity pandemic or problem that we're facing, and problems with cardiovascular disease. So just giving an alternative option and trying to demystify sport and say that it's okay as an aging person to stay in sport, because that's a huge cohort that just drops off.
Yeah.
Because sports, you're too old now. Yeah. Sports for young people, where physical activity is for everyone.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are your numbers like?
I haven't checked.
You said there's 20?
Usually there's 20. I don't know what my numbers are like. Yeah.
Mine are a little bit lower.
Yeah.
My 4th year class is full.
Yeah.
The 3rd year class is about half.
Yeah.
So there's 25. I think 20 something. Yeah. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
So I'm more or less worried about the collapse of that. You talk about these boundaries and maintaining boundaries. What happens when our home becomes our office?
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about.
No.
I'm never, once work is done, you're never going to find me in front of my television again. My office is right in front of my television. Yeah, I'm worried about that. So I don't like that.
I've compartmentalized my home.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have to.
I have in the basement, I have a green screen and a locked-in office.
Oh, okay.
And then I have my gym, which is behind it.
Yeah.
And then I'm not allowed to go down into the basement unless I'm working or working out.
Okay.
So when I come upstairs, I'm done.
Good.
And I keep my laptop down there. I keep my desktop down there. That's it. I'm done.
Good.
So unless I'm in the basement, I'm not working out or working.
Yeah, you're laughing.
Yeah.
I don't have that. We don't have that kind of space.
Well, we had it in our guest room before.
Your office?
Yeah. And then it just bled into my life.
Right.
Yeah.
It starts with the phone and the email.
Yeah.
And then once the pandemic sets in, it's the space now, right?
Yeah.
It's no longer virtual. Yeah. It's dangerous. I don't like it.
And the expectation is that you're
always
available.
on call. Yeah. No thanks.
And the perceptions that you work less, even though you work more.
Absolutely. We're always on.
If your house is your office, you tend to work more.
Yeah.
Because you're always at work.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that.
No. So usually I think we're winding down. So who's doing good research right now that you're reading or into?
Okay, I like, he's not a sport sociologist at all. Mm-hmm. He doesn't talk about sport. I like the work of a guy named David McNally. Okay. He used to be at York. I think he's at the University of Houston now. He does a lot of stuff on like cultural studies and the economy, the Great Recession. Mm-hmm. He does a lot of stuff in terms of Marxism. There's also another guy who sort of overlaps, Nick Dyer Witherford. He's part of this tradition. I don't know if he would actually describe him as a part of tradition. Autonomous Marxism. I did a lot of reading over the summer about the autonomous Marxists of Italy in the 1970s, 60s and 70s, and about this kind of rejection of productionism, which we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of reading about, what is her name? I read a book about the anti-work movement and this idea of post-work. Her name is Kathy Weeks. Mm-hmm. So she talks about the importance of a universal basic income. Yeah. She provides a critique of not just capitalism, but the ways in which unions have bought into productivism as well, and Marxism as well. So the idea here is to actually reward the worker.
Yeah.
without actually questioning what the whole thing is about in the first place.
Yeah.
We don't have to be productive.
Yeah.
So it was kind of it was a great book to read over the summer.
Do you think that we're heading there? Is this the
No,
final catalyst that breaks it, or
heading in terms of
going into the value of non-productivity? Or
I don't think we're there.
Because
in part because we're being forced back to work.
Yeah.
The economy is being forced.
We've been given the taste of, let's not call it universal basic income because it's not
it's far from that.
But the CERB, some people may be looking now, and there's some people who are paid more.
Oh, for sure.
Than they were making when they were working.
Yeah. I think the depravities of capitalism have never been more exposed and glaring than they are now.
Yeah.
At least in terms of recent crises, if you will. Yeah. I think there's hope among the rubble right now. If you, it depends on how you get your news and what you're following and how you engage with social media, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to get into an echo chamber where you only read about bad shit. You only read about possibility. You only read about God knows what, you know? I think there's some reason to be hopeful about a range of things. Yeah. But there's also, it's obviously going to take a lot of work and a lot of persistence and fighting in our province and beyond, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of the current movement stems from that. There's an underlying inequity caused by capitalism. Yeah. And I don't know whether it'll come through because right now there's a big focus on race, but intertwined with that is the capitalist.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, the capitalist system, right?
Yeah.
So inequities in the past are maintained through a capitalistic structure that keeps the top on the top and the bottom on the bottom.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I find it interesting, how Nike will be super, anti-racist, right? Yeah. They'll post on Instagram, but then they'll never talk about raising minimum wage, which will help more people. Right. Of course. So they would rather have
raising minimum wage doesn't sell T-shirts.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Colin Kaepernick does.
Yeah. And they would rather have one person. Let's bring up one person of color and put them on the board of directors.
Yeah. Tokenism. Classic tokenism.
And then let's say how progressive we are, and we've raised one person. Yeah. And their salary, let's say they pay them $10 million a year, it costs them $10 million. Yeah. But if they were to raise minimum wage by, $2, it would cost them billions, right? Yeah. And they would help so many more people by just changing the pay structure.
Absolutely. I think I read a quote from, I don't know what social media said. I can't even remember who said it, but something along the lines of, if a living wage is a threat to if a living wage is breaking the system deserves to be broken. Mm-hmm. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can see how it's easy to see how movements like Black Lives Matter and various anti-racist activism campaigns, it's easy to we need to be suspicious of them being absorbed into corporate capital, right? Yeah. Through, Nike, I love how it's called a diversity alliance in the NHL. Yeah. Like, you notice the word there, right? Yeah. Diversity. Yeah. Why can't they call it the anti-racist alliance? Because that's what we're talking about here. Yeah. I will say that if you were to tell me this time last year that every single game in the NHL, the starting game, would feature not a commemoration, but some kind of pomp and pageantry devoted to anti-racism of Black Lives Matter, I would have said, you're fucking kidding me. There's no fucking way. Yeah. Hockey is one of the more conservative sporting institutions. And then to have Matt Dumba do his speech and then taking a knee, I think it may be cursory, it may be tokenistic, but it's a start, right? Yeah. So you can now hold the NHL's feet to the fire and say, this is what you did. You set up this alliance. What does it mean now? Yeah. Right? So you gain a couple inches, now you can keep pushing.
I'm interested to see whether all of the corporations and the leagues go past the token.
Right. It might just be that it's fashionable right now.
And they'll make more money off of it. Yeah. Right. Here's a way for us to gain viewers that we wouldn't have before. Yeah. But once we gain them, we're not going to change anything. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, as we know in the university, just because you have a committee doesn't mean changes afoot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is interesting how the players are and former players as well. Like I think Evander Kane, Akeem Alou, is that his name? Are on the Diversity Alliance, whatever it's called. Yeah, it's interesting. And in some cases, I think it's about the NHL just kind of following suit with the other leagues. But there are some good signs, I think. There's just things that are unfathomable, that would have been unfathomable a year ago.
Yeah.
You know? Just, it's amazing how change can work like that.
Yeah. My question is whether it will change, any change will happen at a structural level to move beyond the top earning the top and then the bottom earning nothing. Yeah. Right? Whether it'll actually translate to more socialized policies, which actually would help a lot more than elevating one person to be equally, or three people.
Yeah, you're talking about like material changes versus optics.
Yeah,
basically.
Because having an equally representative board of directors is a good thing. Yeah. But it's, I would say, not as good as just raising the floor, which would help so many more people of color than simply beam counting at the highest level.
Yeah, it's kind of like the girl boss thing, right? Yeah. In terms of feminism, which isn't really feminism. A girl boss isn't a feminist expression, at least not the type of feminism I aspire towards. Yeah. So I read another quote, and it was, if you're saying you want to be the girl boss, your next line better be, so I can pay my workers a living wage. If it's not, you need to question why you want to be a girl boss. So we don't, the whole idea of having more diversity in the position of CEO doesn't make a kinder, gentler capitalism, does it? Yeah. Which is precisely what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So I think last question for you. Okay. You have one book for people to read this summer. Doesn't have to be academic. What would you say? What would you recommend?
Oh shit! It is academic. Yeah, I can't believe I haven't talked about this yet. The author is Gerald Rowning. Yeah, Rowning rather. It's called "Factories of Knowledge, Industries of Creativity." And I don't know if I cry easily when I read. I've never cried at the end of a book on social theory. Yeah. This is a social theory book. It starts with some passages from Kafka. It ends talking about various movements from the Occupy movement. Yeah. It's interspersed with discussions of the corporatization of the university. There was such a guarded hope at the end of it that I cried at the end of it. It's a quick read. I read it in probably 4 hours. Oh, nice. It's a very small book. Yeah. But at the end of it, I don't know if it was his writing, if it was the subject matter, if it was just this cautious hope at the end of it that I was bawling at the end of it. Yeah. And I was like, what's going on? I'm crying at the end of something else. So Factories of Knowledge. That would be the one book. Awesome. I can't promise everyone will cry from it, but I found it really something else. What would be your book recommendation?
What would I recommend as a book? So I read a lot of kind of behavior change books. Okay. I read one this summer. What was it called? Atomic Habits by James Clear. Okay. And I thought it was a really good one. Just broke down operant and classic conditioning in a very readable way. Yeah. And designed a way for people to organize their lives and be a little bit more purposeful. It kind of breaks down the idea of, without going into it, free will, where people think they have free will. Yeah. And it's basically his idea is that it's easier to change the environment that you're in than it is to change your motivation.
Interesting.
Right? So
that's like the anti-psych that we were talking about earlier, right? Yeah. The whole idea of the problem is you.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's kind of the main thing is, hey, the problem's not you, the problem's your environment. So become an environmental architect. Sure. Right? Sure. Yeah. So that it's very simple. And he breaks down the habit loop, which is pretty common in psych literature, but he takes the stance that the habit loop is an environmental thing. So it's kind of neat. And he just says, if you want something, make it clear, make it obvious. Right. So and Kels does this to me all the time. Right. So if a certain food is going to go bad soon, she puts it on the table. Okay. And suddenly I'm craving apples. Interesting. Right. Huh. But if they're over here, or if you look in your fridge, right?
Yeah.
What food goes bad? The food at the back.
Yeah, for me, it's the ones on the top, just out of sight line.
Right? So if it's not obvious, you won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're trying to change your habits in terms of workout, well, before bed, take your workout gear and put it, in front of the door. Yeah. Right? So you can't.
No, it makes sense.
You can't get away from it. So make it obvious.
Yeah.
Try and create cravings, right? So you want to make it have value.
Okay.
So when I talk about my spin bike, at first I made it not too hard that it wouldn't be
right.
And then I attached something I already valued to it. Right. So when I bike, I get to wear this sexy singlet and I get to listen to podcasts. Right. So that's when I do my podcasting.
Okay.
Right. So now when it doesn't have an intrinsic value, add an extrinsic and then build in your intrinsic enjoyment afterwards.
Yeah.
What was else? It talks about different techniques that you can use. There's the, what does he call them? Basically, they're behaviors that once you do that, you cannot change them, right? So create, what are they called? Anyway, so the idea behind this was make the start easy. Yeah. So if you're focusing on working out, don't forget to focus on doing, 100 reps of squats. Focus on getting to the gym. Okay. Right? Or it's a commitment device. So my example that I
which isn't new. Like we know this.
Yeah. So if I want to work out, and I'm not feeling the workout, what do? Yeah. Well, I make a huge pre-workout shake and I down it because it's easy to do. Yeah. But once I down that shake, I have to work out or I'm going to feel sick for 3 hours, right? Yeah, so it's easy to drink the shake versus to work out, but just get the process started and connect it so that you can't go back, right? So I drink my pre-workout and I'm either going to sit there feeling sick the whole time or I'm going to go and I'm going to work out, right?
Interesting.
And then ways to make it rewarding. So it's a very good read to try and get yourself, if you're trying to pick up a new habit or create habits. It's a good way to break down the science and make it very digestible.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. I'll have to check it out.
It was a pleasure having you. Thanks for taking the time to chat. It was a lot of fun. This is my first one I actually did in person. So even though the other ones were very enjoyable, the human aspect's nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully for the listeners you heard some background noise. I'm sorry about the FedEx trucks and whatnot, but I just wanted to meet in person as a social human. So
It's good.
Awesome.
Good idea.